In this short video, I want to discuss the nature of communication. What is it, and how can you connect it to a topic? So, communication is basically the transfer of a message from the author to an audience. So the author concocts a message in her brain, and then is going to seek to transfer it to an audience. All right, now the way that transfer occurs is that it happens in a medium, and the medium is going to be a physical medium. Sound waves that jangle against the eardrum and produce sounds that we associate letters with, and meaning with, collections of sounds that we associate words with. It could be if the transmission might be graphite on wood pulp, so you're writing with a pencil on a paper and producing symbols on that paper that carry this the possibility of being interpreted correctly by an audience. And we tend to say that the communication is successful when the message that was envisioned by the author is the message that is received and interpreted by the audience. You can never be sure there's the exact match up because you can't get inside the heads of the audience and the author. But if you can sense that there is an alignment there of meaning, that one group is receiving the same meaning the other group is giving, then we say it's successful communication. All right. At least on a semiotic level. On a semiotic level, I mean on the level of signs and symbols and that sort of thing. Because we also use the word communication to mean, did you get through to the person? Did you communicate? And we say, yeah, he heard my words, but he didn't really, buy into them, or it just didn't communicate to him. Well, that's not what we mean here. We just mean that, what I mean is that the signs have been received and properly interpreted by an audience. Okay, so that's what communication is. Now, you're going to watch this video in conjunction with another one called Texts, Documents, and Signs. And, these are the notions. The message, when it gets put into a physical medium as a text, when that medium becomes copied, and thus copyable, and accessed by a public audience, it's a document. How do you code the meaning? You use signs. You use signs. You primarily use icons and symbols. Although there is that third class of signs, that's the index, that allows us to extrapolate meaning from nature and from cause and event phenomena. So communication thus is very broad. It can include body posture. Is the way as a person is sitting, does it communicate something to you? Can it communicate something to you? How about dress, the way someone is dressed? Hand gestures, the way furniture is arranged in a room, can that suggest something? The colors of the wall. Colors carry connotations. Now, so the message isn't going to be very articulate, but the message might involve attitudes or emotional positioning. And so if there is a collection of signage that is given from one group to another with the intent of raising up a message, a value, a belief, an emotion, so the transfer is designed to fulfill a purpose, we've got communication. So what might car designers be thinking when they design a car? What the aesthetic qualities of that car? What might that be trying to communicate to a buyer? That's communication. What about things like the rhetoric of climate control? Look at the words that are used there. What sort of word choice is going on to generate a certain emotional state in the audience? Is it fear? Is it what's the persuasion there? That's communication. What about the choice of ornaments to put in your backyard? Is that communication or not? Well, I don't know. The backyard is the backyard, isn't it? And many a thing goes lost and hidden in the backyard. But what about the front yard? You know people are going to see the front yard. So it doesn't matter to you what you put in the front yard, knowing that people are going to see it. Now, if it does, then there's a really good chance that some dynamic of communication is happening there. I haven't seen this yet. I've heard it alluded to, but I'm not sure if anyone has actually carried out the work. And that's an analysis of the language of the yard. And what you would do is you would go to a suburban or area or just any neighborhood and just say, here's my geography, here's what I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on this neighborhood of this city, and I'm going to try to develop the code that's happening here. What does it mean to have this type of lawn? What does it mean to have this type of ornament? What does it mean to have this type of porch? So there's communication there. It's that broad too. So there are traditional areas that we just sense are by default communication. The origin of language, the language of leadership, the 5 love languages. Maybe you've heard of that. Should English, and then there are other topics that I would really ask you not to write on because they're so overused. But one being, should English be the official language of the United States? Because apparently the United States still doesn't have an official language. So those are those things. But let's be more creative with our notion of human communication, because it would allow, legitimately so, because it would allow us to bring many, many more things into play for analysis. Okay. One thing I'm particularly interested in this year, believe it or not, is the communication of cereal boxes. How does it communicate desire? What's on that cereal box that makes kids want to buy it? So I stumbled across an article a year or two ago about how the appearance of food communicates something to children, and so that's communication. It can be so very broad. Please use your imagination to figure out a way now to see all the different types of things that can be worked into this notion of the dynamic of communication. All right, because if I were to ask you to come up with a topic within communication, would you still be able to be investigating perhaps the topic you're choosing now? So, for example, let's say you're choosing the topic drugs. Well, how are you going to tie communication in with that? Okay, well, here's an interesting thought. Nancy Reagan declared war on drugs, but it was a very peculiar type of war because there was no physical human enemy that was properly designed as such, and the war wasn't set up so that it had a clear beginning and a clear end. Well, I suppose it began when Nancy Reagan declared war on drugs, but how can you tell when the enemy's been vanquished? And the words that were used there seem to be the words of warfare. And could it be that after using the words of warfare long enough when you're discussing an ideological war like the war on drugs, you actually feel justified in using real bullets against the people you envision to be on the other side of this war as your enemy, say the drug lord, the gang, the addict? Is there a slippage into actual violence based on the war words that are used in this war on drugs rhetoric? Or what about what if you were able to get the data on how people who have kicked a habit of illegal drugs, so a reformed heroin addict or something like that, and you are somehow able to find the data, the language, the articles that describe how these people talk about their experiences. So maybe it would be in a memoir, And you would then find, you would find memoirs of these people that have had a history in this, and see how they talk about their experiences with drugs. What kind of language do they use? Maybe you can do a generic analysis on that. Or here's another one. Every now and then, it's probably more like once a year, a celebrity overdoses on drugs and dies. I think the last to do it was Whitney Houston, but I'm not sure. I don't keep up too much with these things, but can you analyze how people talk about her after this celebrity has overdosed? So it's a death by overdose. You don't know whether it was suicide or if it was just a legitimate overdose. But how does the public talk about that? Do they sense that they themselves had some part of this person's addiction because they clamored for this person? They demanded their time. They demanded this person to come up with another hit. They looked to this charismatic celebrity to be more than just a person. And in order to maintain that energy and that persona, those experiences, that euphoria, whatever, might not the public demand have caused? I don't know. I'm just guessing here. But what is the language used there? What about steroids in baseball? Now, how are you going to tie that in with communication? Okay, well, I'm going to start with baseball, but then I'm going to go, let's just quickly kind of expand it right now, okay? So I'm thinking about some baseball stars that had trials and that vociferously, insisted they were innocent, completely innocent. And then, of course, the evidence finally was insurmountable and they admitted. But let's expand it a little bit here. And what about track stars? What about somebody like Lance Armstrong, bicyclists? Track stars. I know there are a couple very famous ones involved with BALCO, BALCO, Bay Atlantic Laboratory Cooperative, or something like that. The book, if you want to read the book, it starts with BALCO. That's the main title. There's a subtitle, and it talks about a very famous female track star that vociferously denied she was ever using performance-enhancing drugs. Of course, it turned out she was, and it was very embarrassing to her. But she even went so far to take out, I believe, a one-page ad in a book or somewhere saying, "I have never used drugs," in large font. Well, what makes these athletes deny it so strongly? Can you prove that they're actually doing that? Denying it so strongly. I mean, it's like their denials are like someone else's denials on steroids, That's their denial of steroids is on steroids itself, because it's just so... Well, why? That's an interesting question, I think. That would be a way to tie drugs into communication. So the possibilities are very many. And when, when I run into a student, I just want to share with you how I'm thinking. When I run into a student that says, I don't know how to connect my topic to communication, I think that very few times is that student actually dealing with a topic that can't be connected. It's more likely the case that the student is, one, misunderstanding the definition I'm asking him or her to work in, the broad definition, or two, just somehow not keeping his or her eyes open to daily texts like news articles or TV, streaming in websites, talking to you. Just the daily dose of media is somehow slipping past, because it's very often in there you'll get clues or hints as to how many interesting things can actually connect with communication. Or it may be a third case that the student just hasn't spent enough time thinking creatively. Thinking creatively is a very, very hard thing to do, and we tend to sort of relegate it to the fine arts, like poetry writing or novel or creating a music piece or things like that. Fine arts performance of a stage, a play, or acting. But there is a lot of creativity that is necessary for good academic work, and it's a different type altogether. But the creativity essentially is your ability to make connections between things that people haven't usually connected. So dealing with a broader definition of communication may help you do that. I really encourage you to think about this. The topic you have now that you're playing around with, is there some way you can connect it to communication, directly or indirectly? And as soon as you hit upon a way, let me know so I can check it and we'll go from there. Alright, thank you for watching the video. I do hope it's helped.